time to look at another set of Mego's Planet of the Apes figures. These are both brand new figures for Mego and indeed represent something of a debut for Taylor in the collection. Now, as I discussed in my Beneath the Planet of the Apes Mego release video a few weeks ago, I talked about the recent Topps exclusive deal that Mego launched in the US to produce a series of exclusive versions of characters from this film series. But we've also seen in the last few months variants of those characters being released in the European market, and hence you can see the stickers on these action figure boxes here saying that these are European exclusive, limited to just very small 1,000 units. If you're wondering what the difference is between these releases, well, as you can see, the Topps exclusive version of these characters has Zira in her original Planet of the Apes outfit, as we see in both Planet of the Apes and of course Beneath the Planet of the Apes, and Taylor on the other hand was in his sort of savage barbarian garb as we see in Planet of the Apes. Whereas of course here we have Zira in her escape from the Planet of the Apes costume and Taylor in his astronaut costume as we see in the very beginning of Planet of the Apes. So let's start with Taylor. In terms of the packaging, this is going to be very familiar for anyone who's bought any of the other Planet of the Apes Mego releases in recent years. It is that wonderful poster that we've seen many times before. Really love the branding and the colouring on this, and of course we can see the figure in all its glory here as well. When we flip the packaging, we can see they've opted for a somewhat unusual approach here. They've taken a still from the film, but they've digitised it in some way. I'm not quite sure why they've done this. Presumably they have the rights to use the image, so I guess it's an artistic decision, but they definitely have digitised it. It's not a clear photo, obviously, of the character, Charlton Heston of course in the role, and you can see they've also digitally changed the patch on his chest there, which actually says AHSA. Obviously in the film they have the ANSA, obviously a play on NASA for the film, but I'm not quite sure why they've changed that here. Clearly it's a conscious decision to do that. I don't think it's an error. Oddly, on the figure itself, when we look at the patch, you will see that it does say ANSA, not AH, so I'm not sure where this inconsistency has come from. Moving on to the figure himself, I think there's certain things that are real winners about this figure, which we'll look at a bit closer in a moment, and then there's things that let the figure down a little bit, and I think that's mostly in the tailoring. One of the key strengths though is this head sculpt. I think this is a pretty decent likeness of Charlton Heston. Obviously this is Heston with the beard at the beginning of the film. I think this works really well. I think this looks pretty good, and here we can see that image that has obviously been replicated on the back of the packaging as a point of comparison. But I think they've done a really nice job of this. I think the paint apps are well applied. We can see different tones between the top of the hair and of course the beard hair, and they've done a nice job painting the eyes. So I think this is, you know, a very simplistic portrait, but a pretty solid one for Mego. Now, the costume itself is well designed. I like the cut of the costume. I like that it's relatively tight fitting, so it seems quite nicely tailored in that sense. It's close fitting, it looks good. I do really like this central piece, which is kind of diagonal. Sadly, it isn't Velcro, it doesn't come undone, but it still looks the part, which is what it's all about. I think that's really good. I'm less impressed with what was meant to represent the zip, which is clearly just a black piece of cotton just sewn in, which looks a bit untidy and a bit messy and just looks a bit unsophisticated, to say the least. That being said, I do really like the sticker they've used. As you can see here, it clearly says ANSA, which is screen accurate, so I think this is a nice touch. Likewise, I really like the this transfer here of the American flag as well. This looks really solid. If we look at the pockets on the leg, it's a nice attempt, but they don't look really to scale. They look a little bit, well, sewn on and a bit too big for the leg here. They obviously stick out quite a bit, and it's not a great look. It does kind of distort the overall appearance of this costume, which is a shame. He has silver rubber boots. I don't recall seeing these boots before, so these may be a brand new piece, but I'm not 100%. I think these work pretty well. The trouble with rubber boots, of course, is that there is always going to be that tendency for the figure to want to fall over or lean one way or the other, and it's going to be difficult to pose without using a stand. My other criticism would be that the costume, whilst nicely cut, isn't made out of the thickest material. So this white material they've used is quite transparent. We can see the body underneath, the body tone there coming through. It's quite a thin material, so that flesh tone is coming through, and it distorts the crisp, clean white image we would hope to see here. The Beneath the Planet of the Apes action figures benefited from the new Mego moulds. Unfortunately, these ones have very much the traditional Mego bodies and articulation. There's a swivel at the head, meaning the head can rotate all the way around. There is, of course, a elastic band inside the figure which allows the upper shoulder to sort of dislocate to move up and down. It's not a comfortable fit at all. There's a single joint at the elbow, and then of course there is a pin swivel at the wrist, so the wrist can also hinge forwards and backwards and rotate 360 degrees. There is a ball joint at the waist, so the figure can bend forwards and backwards, lean from side to side, and spin side to side as well. There's another joint at the hips, allowing the legs to kick out slightly and kick forwards and backwards, and there's another single joint at the knee. Finally, there is a hinge at the base of the ankle. Taylor does come with one accessory, and that is a rifle. We've seen this piece released a few times before, most recently of course with the Brent figure from Beneath the Planet of the Apes. But I have to say, I think in terms of being able to hold this particular rifle, it's actually much easier with this traditional sculpted hand than it is with maybe the new hands as we saw with the Brent figure. All in all, Taylor is of course a very welcome addition to this line. He is obviously the hero of Planet of the Apes. Charlton Heston is the actor that launched this film franchise, and of course we desperately wanted him in our Mego collection. Now of course we had two choices here. If you're able to get hold of the Topps exclusive version, you could have him in his sort of loincloth version, for lack of a better description, or you can have him in the astronaut costume. For me personally, I always really liked this astronaut costume. I think it was a really good look for this character, so I'm really glad to have this version in my collection. Okay, so moving on to Zira. Of course, this is Zira as she appears in Escape from Planet of the Apes. In terms of the packaging, of course, it is pretty much identical to what we've just seen in virtually any other Planet of the Apes Mego figure. The only key difference here, of course, is the name on the packaging and the figure inside the packaging. On the reverse though, we have this really nice film still taken from Escape from the Planet of the Apes. Obviously very key because we can see Zira here as she appears in this costume, as opposed to one of the more traditional green outfit, for example. This looks really nice. I really like this approach, and I much prefer to have a nice, clear, undigitally enhanced version. This looks really good. I think this looks really good for display and is quite collector friendly. So let's take a close look at this quite surprising release, because I don't think anyone anticipated them releasing Zira from Escape from the Planet of the Apes. It's just not something I've ever thought about before, but it is quite a novel approach to having a variant for this character. And it certainly helps diversify the collection, making the Planet of the Apes line quite a colourful and interesting lot to look at when you put them all together. Now, in terms of the sculpting, obviously this is the recycled Zira head. We've seen this before. It's not the greatest likeness in the world. It's quite a simplified version, as you would expect from Mego, harking back to the 70s, but it does the job. Now, if we think about the actual costume though, this is less successful, I think. It's not really quite accurate. It doesn't have any of the buttons. It doesn't have the frilly sleeves with the colours on them, or indeed the cloak, which would have been really nice. So I have to say, of the two, I do prefer the original Zira. This is the one I would have liked to have got my hands on, because this is much more screen accurate, and they've done a much better job here, I think, than they have with this version from Escape. Taking a closer look at the materials used, they have used quite a nice felt-like material which catches the light really, really nicely, so it does kind of have an almost metallic glow to it, which is quite lovely. But yeah, it's got a nice texture, but it's not screen accurate at all. Boots, however, are identical to the other release. They have used these sort of beige boots. They are a hard plastic, again quite difficult to have this figure stand up, and of course this skirt is quite restrictive and a big hindrance to an already limited articulation scheme. And speaking of the articulation scheme, this is identical to what we saw with the Taylor, so I'm not going to go through it again. It is the basic mould that we've seen before and suffers all the limitations that come with that. So it would have been nice if they'd use this as an opportunity to do something new and different and employed one of the new body molds or the new body types. That would have been really fun and exciting to see here, but sadly they didn't in this case. Now, I know that's always going to split opinion in the audience. Some people might really love that they've gone for this traditional approach, and others, like myself, might be disappointed that they haven't gone for the more modern approach, I suppose. But yeah, all in all, this figure's a little bit disappointing. I was really excited to finally get my hands on a Zira because I don't have one already, so this is my only Zira so far. But I have to say, of the two, in my opinion, this is the weaker. All in all, an interesting couple of figures, both highly anticipated by myself, to be honest. I was really looking forward to getting my hands on both of these figures. I love both these characters very much, and it was been a long time coming to finally have them in my collection, considering I have quite a broad range of apes now. It's nice to add some more human characters, and I have to say, in contrast to the Beneath the Planet of the Apes figures with their fantastic articulation and new sculpts and whatnot, I'd say these are a little bit disappointing. They probably would have fared a lot better in terms of my review if I opened these guys first, but that's not the way it went down. So yeah, I have to say there's something slightly disappointing about them. I do really like the Astronaut tailor, especially that head sculpt. I think that's really solid, but there are little things that let both of them down in their own way. But certainly they're not bad figures by any stretch of the imagination, just perhaps a little bit disappointing. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and remember to subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos soon.